Welcome to this exciting Betazone session. My name is Emma Graham. I am so delighted to be leading you through this panel today. So, this morning, we are stepping into the shoes of a cyber defender to explore the groundbreaking anti-cybercrime strategies of 2025 that shifted the battleground. But now, we are about to enter into the mind of a cyber criminal. Get ready, everyone. Let me now invite Max Smeets, co-director of Virtual Roots, to the stage. Max.
And I'm going to need your active participation here because we're going to run a scenario called Inside the Cyber Criminal Mind. For any of you who are normally very diplomatic, please, not this time. I want you to shout as we go through the scenario for either going option A or option B. So anyone who has some trading floor experience is going to come in very, very handy here. In this scenario, you are the leadership team under attack, and you will have to be inside the criminal mind to make sure that your reputation is still intact after this incident unfolds. So let's get going. As you will see, Joel is clicking on an email. It turns out to be, unfortunately, a phishing email for him, and the system gets compromised. As you can read, the data gets exfiltrated and encrypted, so a real risk there. The question to all of you, very quickly, you've got two options here. Are you either going for containment, you're going to immediately shut down remote access for all employees, or are you going for option B, forensics? So you're going to keep the systems running, you want to have some more intel collection, and you want to not hold operations. All right, please join me. You can shout. Everyone, almost all A, almost all A. Any Bs? There are some Bs. Okay. So a few Bs who took the risk to, not hold operations. The majority immediately goes for A, don't want to run any risks. But unfortunately, what has happened is that, the attackers probably escalated access and ultimately got to your files. They are now putting a double extortion threat here. Paying crypto to stop publication and to receive the decryption keys. So what are you going to do? You've got, again, two options. A, are you going to pay the ransom very quickly, hoping for decryption keys and silence? Or are you going to not pay, option B, refusing to pay, and you're going to try and start to restore from backups, maybe also negotiating to buy time? What are you going to do? No A? It can't be. According to Coveware, almost 1/3 of the victims ultimately pays, and I've only heard one person here so far. It's very tricky. No one else? No one else for A? Makes, of course, sense to go for B here, not pay, and at least also figure out what they have stolen. What happens, though, is that we see a series of scenarios. The data gets leaked. It's being also published in newspapers and on social media. A variety of different people start writing about the incident. According to one person, he or she states, "This is why we need stricter enforcement, not apologies with bad lighting." You got two options here again. Are you going to focus your efforts on IT security? Are you going to deploy technical resources to mitigate the attack? Or are you going for option B, and instead are you going to put your resources into your own reputation? You're going to mobilize your crisis comms team, and you're going to really publish the verified facts that are out there and try and own this narrative about the incident. Perhaps a more difficult choice than the previous one. Are you going for A or B? Here we do see a split. Those probably, who have some SOC experience are others for the IT. Anyone else B? No one here is willing to dare to give an answer. Anyone? Mixed two. Okay. It turns out that the attackers have actually maintained access. Unclear why, whether this is compromised credentials that are still out there. They have potentially had such a deep access that is continued. And you're now for a difficult decision again to make. Are you either going to notify law enforcement here and you're going to disclose the details of the breach to them? Or are you going for option B? And you're going to try and delay disclosure. You're going to hold the intel as close as possible, and you're going to primarily, because you fear scrutiny and reputational risk. Which route are you going to go for? A lot of A's. Everyone seems to be going for the law enforcement, although it has actually been shown in a couple of cases, like the Hive incident, only 20% of the victims seem to actually go to law enforcement, in this case the FBI. But here most people have chosen A, I believe. And then we get to the end. You're going to have to make a post-incident response decision. The incident has occurred, and you're going to have to come up with a plan here. Are you either going to stay silent, you're going to just continue to focus on these containment efforts, or are you really going to draw out this case to the public? You're going to tell your story, maybe, at the next WEF, you will be here on stage sharing your story about what has happened and potentially empower the defenders as well and undermine cyber criminals. Who wants to be choosing for option A, and who wants to be choosing for option B? One more time. I hear initially mostly A, and then people started to go to B. Okay. Still mixed. Thank you for being so active here. There are a couple of key takeaways here that I'm sure we'll get back to on the panel as well. But two to highlight here that the WEF has put together. The first one, of course, is that cyber incidents are not just technical issues, but they're real business crises that require a much broader response set, or already a prevention set, thinking about your playbook, your communication, and so on. And secondly, as that relates to it, proactive communication and responsible action can really help strengthen your, not just brand reputation, but your broader posture in these types of crises. Turn it back over to Emma.
Thank you so much, Max, for that fantastic presentation. Did everybody enjoy? Did we learn something? We're going to learn even more now. Let me welcome to the stage, we've got Neil Jetton. Thank you so much for joining us here today. He's the Director of Cybercrime Directorate at Interpol. And Max, please join us on stage as well. Thank you so much. How are you today, Neil?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege. Thanks.
I think you have some remarks prepared for our group today. So I'll let you take it away, and then I have some questions. I'm going to grill you both.
Yeah, great. So, I appreciate WEF for coming up with this innovative, format to kind of change things up. I also think Max did a great job of, presenting. You can see how difficult these sort of incidents are. I mean, it requires businesses and individuals to make some very tough choices. Do you report? Do you potentially, damage your reputation? It's not just rhetorical. So I'm the cybercrime director of Interpol, but I'm also seconded from the U.S. Secret Service. So in the past year that I've been the cybercrime director, I have had, and I won't go into too specifics, obviously, but I've had individuals, businesses reach out to me direct and say, hey, our network has been hit. We have been the victim of a data breach, ransomware, whatever it is. Can Interpol help? And the first question that I always ask is, which law enforcement agency have you reached out to? In several instances, they're like, we don't want to, reach out. And it is understandable. But from my perspective and Interpol's perspective, we can't really do anything. So, of course, I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of reporting, but that's really what drives for law enforcement, is just that first initial interaction with the victims. And so you can see these types of cases are very tough. And we say it all the time, cybercrime is borderless, and that's true. I mean, that's why Interpol exists. But also, they're just very tough to investigate. I mean, it requires funding for tools and training and specialized units. And a lot of countries, just quite frankly can't afford to do that. So that's where Interpol comes into play. But also, you look at this and you just look at the trillions of dollars that are lost and attributed to cybercrime. every year. You know, it's in the trillions. It'll only increase. And you look and see, why don't people report? And there's going to be a variety of ways or reasons. But also, I mean, these cases, you look at them and they involved multiple things, right? You have to have the initial access with phishing, then there's going to be some sort of ransomware, then there's extortion, then you have to worry about brand damage. So there's a lot to think about. And I think when I mentioned the loss just increasing year over year, I think it's supposed to increase by 142%, the global loss of cybercrime in the next couple of years. And I think what happens, though, is that you begin to just see these numbers, and especially like in law enforcement, you read reports after reports, and your eyes start to glaze over because you think it's just so big. And what you forget is that there are actually real people behind every breach, every crime. And I think it's very, very easy to forget that human element, especially sometimes law enforcement. We will just do that because we're on to the next thing, but to actually think about the human element that's behind it. And so one of the things that we've done in Interpol is we brought together experts from across the globe in law enforcement, and now we're onboarding private sector partners. We call it CyberX. And what we did, we had our first in-person meeting in Lyon earlier this year, and we had lots of panels. But we had a panel focused on victims, where we brought, she's a prominent victim of romance scams. She has a special out on Netflix. She told her story. We also brought a CISO from a large company that has been it's a very prominent case that was a victim of AI or social engineering. I think there's some still trying to figure that piece out. But they lost millions of dollars. And both of them, though, the CISO and then the victim themselves, had the courage to come up and speak to an audience of law enforcement and private sector partners and talk about their loss, about how much it hurt them. And I think it takes courage, especially, it takes courage for both. But I was really impressed with the CISO because he didn't have to do it. He didn't have to get up and talk about, he obviously had approval from his company. He didn't have to get up and do that, but he did. And there are a variety, he said, if I don't do it, how are other companies going to know how to better defend themselves? So I think that's very, very good. And you look at, Max kind of mentioned it about reporting. And so the number that I recently saw for cybercrime, it is 15%. At least that's what the FBI said. 15% of all cybercrimes are reported. So you look at all these numbers of trillions of dollars in loss, and you're like, it's got to be a small fraction of what's actually out there and being actually taken away from victims. And there are a variety of reasons for that. Obviously, there's you have to know that you're being attacked, and there's an incident, something's in your system. But also there's shame involved in some cases. Sometimes you feel like you might be blamed for the crime. Also, I was in a panel yesterday with about fraud, and they said that, and it's a big thing, is a lot of people don't even know how to report. How do you even report that you are being victimized? Where, for your government, is there a mechanism that makes it easy for victims? And so I'll just kind of briefly touch on what Interpol is doing to help support our 196 member countries. So it's quite a lot. It runs the gamut for all of them. And so my team is based in Singapore. We have a few of my officers are based in regional offices in Africa. But what we do is we focus on three things, really. We focus on capacity building, we focus on intelligence sharing, and then we focus on operational support. But none of those work in a vacuum, and they all work together, and they all work through partnerships. And I'll touch on one of the operations that we just recently concluded. It was called Serengeti. Brought 18 countries together, 18 African countries plus the UK, all joined forces with us, and we went after a whole suite of cybercrime during this operation. And we had 1,200 arrests, almost $1 million of loss recovered, thousands of infrastructure actually disabled that were hosting, whatever malicious malware. So very, very successful. 2 years ago, though, the same operation, 16 arrests. Then you fast forward in 2 years, we have 1,200 arrests. A lot of it is because my team has learned, how to do things, kind of improve in their way of doing things. It's also buy-in, but it's also the partnerships. And so the WEF is a very good partner. So what we will do is, I think Europol calls them SWIFT, we call them coordination meetings where we bring these countries together. Europol calls them sprints. Interpol bring these countries together. We will then focus on whatever target that we were looking at. We will bring partners such as the WEF, such as ISPs, such as intel companies that we are intelligence threat companies. Then we will work on the problem at hand. And so that has been a very successful model, but it only works through a partnership. So one of the things, and then I'll plug and then I'll stop, is that we have brought back our cyber expert working group. And I mentioned it, and we base it on 4 pillars. It is empowerment, strategy, investigation, and prevention. And so these things are what we are going to focus on in the next few years for Interpol. In our Cybercrime Directorate, we invite you, if you're interested, to be a part of this. And then what I have to do, of course we have ransomware. It's not going away. But what we have to do is look forward at what emerging threats are we seeing that I can help the vast majority of our 196 member countries. So in the future, just some of the areas that we're going to look at are we're going to look at increasing the resilience for critical infrastructure for our member countries, bringing together law enforcement and cybersecurity agencies. We're going to look at phishing and how to combat that. If we can reduce that, we'll have a major impact on cybercrime. I will steal good ideas like Singapore's anti-scam shield app. And also some of the things, image-based sexual abuse is something that's increasing by hundreds of percent, especially in Africa. And then the last thing we're going to do is look at the industrialization of cybercrime and try to stop it. And one of our focus will be on looking at illicit use of residential proxies. So all these things we were working on. But we need the subject matter expertise that comes from you out in the audience. So with that, I will stop. But I just want to thank the WEF, and I want to thank you for your time and attention. Thanks.
And thank you. So many things to unpack there, Neil. And you mentioned the human element of cybercrime, and I think that's what comes to mind for me specifically. Why do you think, and I'd like to get both of your views on this, I'll start with you, Max. Why do you think that cybercrime is so underreported compared to violent crime? You know when somebody's going to rob your house and you can see it coming, but cybercrime is very different. Can you explain kind of the mentality of why it's so underreported? Max, I'll start with you.
It's extremely, as what Neil already mentioned, right? There are a couple of different elements involved. One of them is shame, that you will see in a human context, but you also see this in a business context as well. But secondly, it's also one for many organizations, especially SMEs, they don't immediately know where to go to, right? We've been talking here about law enforcement, but they sometimes don't know the distinction, let's say in the UK, whether they should go to the NCA or whether they should go actually to the NCSC. And then this is already a country that has clearly well-established organizations in place. But today, with ransomware in particular becoming much more global threats taking place across the world with victims in countries where many of these institutions do not exist, they don't have a business card from Neil and they're going to just call them up.
But I'll give it to you.
Careful what you wish for. Neil, why do you think that cybercrime is so underreported?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think a lot of it is shame. In certain cases, it just depends. I think a lot of it is they feel foolish. Maybe they feel like, law enforcement just won't be able to help them. I think there's some of that. They see the numbers, trillions of dollars, and they're like, well, I only lost 17,000 or whatever it is. Mine is so minor. But again, I encourage, and I say this, and especially from a law enforcement perspective, I encourage everybody to report because A, we can't help you. We can't prevent future victims from being victimized. And also, I think it's the way for law enforcement to understand emerging criminal methodologies.
It's so interesting, and we're here in the UAE, and I've lived here for nearly 10 years, and I found that the UAE specifically is very, very good at combating cybercrime. I, as a person that lives here, know exactly where and who to report any cybercrime. They're very good here, whereas in London, physical crime, you get your phone stolen, good luck to you. Not really sure how you deal with that. How are you, Neil, working with countries to ensure that there is a framework for reporting these crimes?
Yeah, so obviously we have, anybody can use our, 196, we have touch points, we call them national central bureaus in all those countries, and we have a 24/7 information network that they can, through their law enforcement, reach out directly to us. That is one of the things that we are looking at. There are a lot of countries that have been thinking about this and have looked at the reporting and how, especially like when it comes to phishing. I'm sure while you're sitting here, probably many of you are receiving a text message or emails or whatever, that are going to be like just hello or, something. But what can you do with that? And so, I live in Singapore. I'm fortunate to live there right now. And we work with their agencies and they've developed some very nice tools. What I'm trying to do is how do I then take that and scale that across for countries that don't necessarily have those means. So it is something that we think about every day. I do think that there should be some sort of mechanism. Every country should be thinking about it, how to report.
Now, I want to move from the country side of things to the people side of things. My lovely audience, how many of you have banking on your iPhone right now? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you use location services on your phones? Max, what does that mean when you think about how protected we are as a society and how vulnerable we are as a society? Both of you, I'd love you to weigh in on this because I've learned recently that I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm a journalist, I'm a target perhaps. I go to a lot of different places across the world. I use burner phones, my company makes sure that I do, but we're still not completely safe. Can you give some advice to our audience here and businesses here on how to protect themselves from cybercrime?
Sure. Of course, we all carry, as our attack surface indeed increases, we're carrying more mobile devices with us, with more apps, and maybe not just your mobile, but many other devices as well, your smartwatch, you name it. It creates more risk, and it starts still with, the basics of security, whether this is multi-factor authentication, making sure that you, on the one hand, have really good passwords, but on the other hand, have another form of authentication, whether this is a text message or something else. It's often those very basic principles that ultimately lead you to not be perfectly secure, which is, in fact, almost impossible to do, but at least defend yourself against 99% of the threats. And just to mention one, remarkable case here, when we look at, for instance, the usage of YubiKeys, these are specific keys for MFA, for multi-factor authentication, we know of no or close to no incidents where someone's inbox was actually breached when someone used these keys in a good manner.
It's really interesting. Neil, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think Max hit it on the head. So yeah, also, we all do these things, and I'm sure you see them all the time, these campaign awareness, programs. And sometimes I even have to tell my team, like, what is 2 weeks of doing a campaign awareness actually doing? But I think what we need to be doing is actually being more strategic about who we're targeting. So I have a son who's just got his smartphone last year, and so of course you have to have these uncomfortable conversations. Max had mentioned about phones and about an increased attack service. 60% of the world have phones. I'm sure several of you have multiple phones. So of course we're victims, potential victims all day, every day. We have to be cynical, but it is having those conversations with those communities that may not be as savvy. We can all be victimized, it's not that. But I would say your parents, are definitely probably not as tech savvy as you are. Your children, none of us grew up having to deal with social media and having all these apps just, all the time, everywhere on this device. And so it's just having those conversations about trying to have better cyber hygiene, taking those preventative steps to take care of yourself. I will say about the youth, and asking them to, pointed questions. So we just recently did a webinar for the Asia South Pacific region focused on youth cyber hygiene. And my team was telling me they're going to do this, and I was like, how many people were going to get involved in, going to do this? 600 people joined us for this webinar with parents, teachers, and students. So clearly there is a need to get the message out about how to be responsible and the steps that you can take to better prevent from being victimized.
Excellent. So we have almost 5 minutes left. I'd love to ask our audience if we have any questions. There will be a microphone. Do we have any questions from the audience for Neil or Max this afternoon? If not, I have a ton more. I can keep you all here. But any questions? Okay, well, while you're thinking.
They weren't shy with shouting, but they've become a bit shy now.
I have so many questions. Maybe that's just the nature of my job, but you just shout if you have one. What scares me the most about the kind of networks that we're seeing today, and it's probably scaring both of you, that's why you're both doing what you're doing, is just how advanced some of these scams are. Max, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there are a couple of elements here, if I may unpack them, and specifically related to ransomware, where I've been primarily focused on in the past few years. there is a bit of a paradox here. Let's start with that. And I call this myself the trust paradox, where on the one hand, these groups have to be very advanced in deceiving you. They have to write a good phishing email, and we've talked about that, have to do enterprise-wide encryption and so on. But then equally, as they deceive you, they have to be quite advanced in gaining your trust. You need to believe that compliance yields to the promised outcome, that actually by paying 100K, a million, that you do get your data back and that your data is not being put online. So they need to find a way to do that. And for them to overcome this paradox, they really need to put a lot of practices in place that people very frequently forget, which is just as advanced as the act of deception. So for example, you'll have a group like Clop, a ransomware group that sets up a 24/7 communication service. You can go to them with all of your questions, sometimes in multiple languages. It's a way to build that trust. Equally, you will think about this reputation management for these groups. The worst thing that can happen is that the first 10 search results on Google say, this group is unreliable. If you pay, you don't get your decryptor. They have to rebrand. So when we think about the advancement of these groups, it's far beyond their technical capacity, but really about their ability to position themselves today in this space. And what we see is that they're really learning from each other. They're learning from simple things, how to set up a leak site, a shame site where they publish data, to learning how to create a better brand for themselves, to learning what type of negotiation portal to use. All of these key elements to make sure that you ultimately pay.
Neil, can you give us some hope on something that you've overseen where you've seen some arrests, you've seen some heads being knocked together? Give us some hope.
No heads knocked together, don't quote that. Yeah, I mean, it isn't all doom and gloom. I mean, we are here together in this room to look and try to really develop tangible, concrete answers for this very, very complex problem. I mean, we think about AI and these things about how it can, definitely facilitate criminals, and their ability for scope and efficiency with phishing emails. But also, we can use those same technologies for defense. But I'll say that, we did an Africa Cyber Threat Assessment earlier this year where we had, most of the, like 40-something countries respond. And there was a huge increase from 2024, or from, the previous year, about building cybercrime units. So there is a lot of focus across the globe on how to combat, transnational cybercrime more effectively. And I do think that even geopolitically, I won't get into, but like on a law enforcement to law enforcement communication and relationship, we understand that there's no way that we can, be successful against cybercrime without those relationships. So I do think that we are opening up those channels. I think Interpol, is a conduit for that as well. It's just making sure that we bring those countries together. But yeah, there is hope. I mean, I do think that the more awareness that we have, I think that's one of the better strategies against combating it. But yeah, it is a difficult problem.
It's difficult. So on that happy note, how can we bring more awareness to cybercrime and make sure that people really know what to do and how to deal with these issues?
Yeah, so I'll just say that, all of you, and there's a lot of, government officials here at this meeting as well as private sector, but do what you can in whatever capacity you can do it to get the message out, whether if you're a private sector and you can do something through your tools, or especially if you're a government official, just make sure, I'll say this, and we don't get into like telling countries what to do, but I will just say that I hope that all governments prioritize cybercrime. I mean, you can see it is an element in every crime type. You look at whatever crime that you're investigating, whether it's drugs or gun smuggling, or we see it with cyber scam centers and human trafficking, there is a cyber element to all of it. And so I think that if you can combat that and focus on that as a main focus area, I think that's a good strategy. And also, sorry, I know just a few seconds, but one of the things that I would also do is bring people together. So bring law enforcement and bring your cybersecurity agencies, bring your telcos and your financial institutions, bring these as a center and bring them under, physically one roof. I think that is a very good strategy to reducing cybercrime.
And just to double click on that, when we share these stories, we have a tendency to share stories when these cyber criminals were successful, when we were breached, when we were a victim. It's equally important to share these stories where you had these cases, of course, of prevention, and also where these cyber criminals failed, right? It often boosts their reputation when we come out with stories that say, you know, they were highly sophisticated and successful in breaching organization X, Y, or Z and causing millions of dollars in damages. But, you know, cases that we have seen, for instance, with law enforcement against groups like Lockbit, also when you, for instance, disrupt them or when you're a victim, point out that they have not been deleting data, point out that they have been making mistakes, you know, undermine also that branding element that these groups carry with them.
Excellent. That's a very positive note to end on this afternoon. Thank you so much, Neil and Max, and very much to the audience for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of your WEF here in Dubai. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Max. Great job.
Thank you, John.